Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. You'll be sick of the sight of me. I am now presenting on a Friday until Laura is back. And I'm joined by Brian Degnan, regular Friday contributor, and Alan Morrison from Celtic by Numbers. Tell us where to find you, Alan. Where can we find your blog and also your channel?
Yep, so Celtic by Numbers on Twitter and my own website. The Huddle Breakdown is the podcast that we do on a weekly basis, collaborating with some more talented people, to be honest. And that's mainly it. And hopefully, here occasionally, which is always fun. So thanks for having me on.
It's always good, Alan. I mean, I go back to the days when, back in the day when it was an audio podcast, and we used to do a show called A Celtic State of Mind. And Kevin Graham and you used to bat back and forward various opinions on players like Chris Ayer and Ryan Christie. We've moved on since then, and it's in full technicolor. There's loads to discuss, though, as is always the case with Celtic. We'll be talking about some of the big talking points, but the strapline is really going to bring in a few different discussion points because it will inevitably lead to a discussion on Giakoumakis. But obviously, we're in January. We're in the throes, Brian, of the January transfer window. Are you concerned that this particular deal isn't going over the line as quickly as some of the others? Or are you just looking at it and saying, listen, it's a deal-by-deal basis. This one isn't going to be as easy. There's loads of other interest. And it now looks as though we might have been trumped for our initial target. What's your thoughts on it, Brian?
So, again, I always sort of compare previous seasons to this in terms of how would I feel. If it was, 3-4 years ago, then I'd be thinking, this is a bit of a nightmare, this is dragging on, not happy. Whereas I think that Andrew's quick to get in the players that we've got in before the transfer window even opened. It was places we needed to strengthen. I think Alan Johnson was excellent against Rangers. I think he looks a real good find. I expect the same for Iwata and Kobayashi. Mm-hmm. So I'm not especially concerned. If we needed 4 players, we hadn't signed anyone by this stage, I'd be getting a bit twitchy, to be honest. But I think given the fact that I don't think the team's in any huge rush to fill gaps. I mean, Giakoumakis is still there for the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If he left and we didn't sign anybody, I'd get nervous until we get someone else in. And in terms of the actual guys we're signing and the hold-ups, to be honest, the Giakoumakis deal took quite a while, if I remember. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of sort of to and fro, and Ange called him personally and they weren't sure if he was going to go or if he was going to go somewhere else. And I think he came in quite late, if I remember. I could be wrong, and that's fine. But so I'm not overly concerned at this stage, if I'm honest. I think that if it had been, as I say, if we hadn't signed anybody so far, I might be a bit more worried, or if we had those injuries up front.
Oh, yeah.
Because the thing about it is, like, even if Giakoumakis went and we don't find a suitable replacement right away, we've still got Maeda that can go there. And I actually think he'd be better up front at times. No better than Kyogo, but just better than it wide. I think it suits his game a bit more. So I'm no hugely concerned at this stage.
No, I think you make a good point there, Brian, because we were talking during the week about how we should kind of stand firm or hold firm when it comes to transfer fees. And what I kind of meant by that was that we're in control of this situation. I mean, you don't want to have players that are unhappy. I think there was a real example of that, a really bad example of that in Neil Lennon's final season. There was a decision to keep players at the club that didn't want to be here. And it showed, right? It showed throughout, permeated throughout the actual squad. We don't really want to get into a situation like that, Alan. But as Brian says, even though there seems to have been a stumbling block with Cho, I am quite comfortable at the moment because Giakoumakis hasn't gone anywhere yet. We'll have a wee chat about him and the possible move that he might make. But at this moment in time, as it stands, and it also looks, as the tagline suggests, as though we have a backup plan.
Yeah, no, I'd expect Celtic to have a list of players and to work through that list in the event that one of them didn't work out. What is unusual about this one is just the length of time this is dragging on. So my understanding is that Celtic have always been looking for a third striker to go with Giakoumakis and Kyogo. So a few things to unpack there. So if Giakoumakis does end up leaving, and I don't really know what his thoughts are. It's been suggested that this is a lot of agent-initiated activity as far as Giakoumakis is concerned. What his personal views are, I don't know, obviously. But it could be that Celtic may need to look for 2 strikers, in which case, one to replace Giakoumakis and one which we were always looking for as a third option. What's unusual is the length of time this has taken. So my understanding is that Celtic, started contact with Cho's club before the World Cup and had an agreement in principle for a fee. The World Cup obviously happened, and he did very well. His profile rose, and then, obviously his agent and his club are obviously thinking, well, we can, his profile's increased, we can get more money out of this. Now, what is, I think, a little bit surprising is that Celtic haven't just kind of walked away, because we have been doing deals very quickly. So what that says to me is that they obviously feel that there's still mileage in this, but obviously they still want the kid as well. I think that's the main thing, and I think they're right to do so, because my understanding is that he's, even at the price point he's at, which is around the sort of 2.5 to maybe 4 million, is the various figures that have been bandied around. I still think that probably represents terrific value for Celtic. But having said all that, we know that the manager is very big on, looking in the whites of people's eyes and do you really want to come here? Yeah. And it very much looks over the last couple of days from the reports coming out of South Korea is that really he's Celtic have been used here as a bargaining chip, and actually he's got ambitions elsewhere. And there was even a report today from South Korea come out that if he did leave based on what's on the table, he would go to Mainz because he has a friend, a Korean colleague that plays there as well. So all of this suggests to me that this isn't going to happen, right? And so I would, if that being the case, I think we should just cut losses and move on to the next target. Would be my thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you said there, because in relation to the strikers that we need, because all season I've been saying that come January, I do think we need backup to Kyogo and Giakoumakis. And then obviously the spanner that's thrown in the works is the fact that the Giakoumakis situation has developed. There are 2 strikers on the screen at this moment in time, but with every passing day and every update that we seem to be getting, the latest one being that he sees his future perhaps in Germany, Brian, you do get to the stage where it's not even as though we need to urge anybody to do anything. You just know Ange is going to say, you know what, I'm out, because if you don't want to play for this team and you don't want to work with me and with my backroom team, then there's plenty others who will. And I think that if you get out at that stage, then it's a potential problem later down the line. I mean, I know the club are interested in brand and the fact that this guy chose a huge brand in South Korea. I get all that. But at the end of the day, if he's going to cause you trouble and there's another option available, then you move on, and hopefully we will move on swiftly. And all the transfers that we've seen so far is that we will, Brian. So I'd still have confidence. Szymon Wlodarczyk is someone whose name has been touted a couple of times by, of course, Fabrizio Romano. And if he puts his seal of approval on it, people start getting interested. But let's not forget, Brian, Romano said Juranovic was away at the beginning of the season. Didn't happen. Doesn't always happen that way. But I do like the look of this kid. So if we were to compare the 2 players, Cho at 24 is 4 years older than Wlodarczyk, if that's how you pronounce it. They're both playing, in completely different environments, with Cho playing in South Korea and Wlodarczyk in Poland. I think the South Korean has the full international capabilities of the World Cup behind him, whereas Wlodarczyk's coming through. He's an under-21. But his goal scoring this season in particular has been very impressive, with 7 and 17, a goal every 116 minutes. And there's talk of £3.5 million in the offing for a 20-year-old Polish under-21. What's your thoughts on the backup, the contingency plan, if indeed that is who we're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overarching thing to remember is, I think it was this time last year we were looking at Riley McCree.
Yeah.
Lou Mark Riley came in, and I think everyone collectively now looks back.
No regrets.
No regrets, absolutely not. And I think that, so, the way the media works, we're always linked with players, so we start obsessing as fans over these players, we're YouTubing them, and we're convinced, and we're trying to find their Instagrams, and we're trying to
pronounce their names.
I think Natasha and Declan are already stalking this poor Korean guy and trying to find out where he is. So we kind of get obsessed with this thing, but the chances are there's, as Alan alluded to, there's a lot happening in the background. Comparison to these two strikers, you know, I'm not going to try and say the Polish chap's name. I'll just call him Simon for a moment.
Sid.
Sid, big Sid. Big Sid. I think that the fact he's 20 years old is something that I always think is good for us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Alan and I have spoken about it before. I think conceptually that's the way the club should be going, but understand also we can't always get these guys because the bigger fish come in. But I think getting guys like that in is a good age. And I think we have to get back to it, right? And I'm not saying for the moment that say that a Joey Dawson is going to be a first team starter and a Champions League striker just now. However, as a third choice striker, you're relying on, say, Kyogo getting injured. For the moment, Giacomakis getting injured, Maeda coming in, and another while getting injured. Then he would be a choice to come in. Why know that? Why not give him a wee bash instead of trying to sign two guys? I just think, and I understand why, right? I get it, but I would like to see maybe we sign a striker, have Maeda as a sort of cover for both winger or striker, and have like the boy Dawson coming in, because we were having a really good discussion actually on the group chat the other day about loanees and stuff and the loan stuff. And I've got a kind of different opinion for a lot of people, but I think the thing to remember is even if Joey Dawson or a guy like him was to come up to the first team, he's surrounded by, although he's playing at the low league level, he's surrounded by considerably better players around about him that should bring his game on. So it was the same when we signed Segrist as well. I was saying, well, where does that leave Toby Oluwayemi? Is he now fourth choice and he was still looking for another keeper? So it's things like that. So I think if we sign one of these guys, I'd be really comfortable. I suspect if we sign the Korean guy, it's to start, if I'm honest. I think given his international profile, given what he offers and given the amount of attention around him, I suspect he'd want to come in and obviously can't guarantee game time, but I think he'd want to be first choice and very he'll struggle. I don't think he would sit quietly behind Kyogo. So it'd be interesting where that competitive thing comes in. And then just lastly on Giacomakis, we don't know the reasons, but I think the thing we also have to remember is a lot of people are saying things like he wants to go, he doesn't want to be here. But it could be the case he's just became a dad, I don't know, maybe for the first time, and he has to look at his finances. And it might be the case that we saw this document come out recently that was supposed to be players' salaries and he was quite low. And it could be the case he just wants a better deal. It wasn't forthcoming and he has to move with his family. So sometimes the narrative of he wants to leave, he doesn't want to be here, isn't maybe accurate. Could be the case, but I just think it's nice to give another version of that.
Bit of context, yes. Personal circumstances, human beings after all, Brian. I'm going to ask Alan a wee bit about Giacomakis and we can get our take on that. But before I do that, I'm going to bring in some of the comments from our regulars and some new commenters. Jungle Lion, whatever the circumstances, GG can't be let go until another striker is done and dusted. I agree with that because I think we're short even just with him and Kyogo. Jungle Lion, I totally agree with that. And I even pitched last week if it was possible to save the scenario and turn it right round and keep Giacomakis, and I don't think we're at a stage where we can do that. The Killing Moon, Forrest cuts it back, GG puts it in. I'm not so sure we can just replace GG's input. Folk are quite blasé about going down to a single striker, in my opinion. A few imponderables about the incoming here. Well, I want to talk to you about this, Alan, because I think when Giacomakis came in, I liked, obviously, everything that Brian said before, all the research you do about a player. I liked what I seen. Took a while for him to get started. And when he got started, I thought his touch was abysmal against Alloa, and I said as much. And he got a wee bit of stick against Hearts, even though he scored a goal. But since then, he went on to become a real favourite of mine. I really like his style. I loved his attitude last year when he was even being interviewed. I loved that forthright attitude. No, we are the best in the country. And, you know, there's always going to be at a club like Celtic, if you want to be successful, there's always going to be that nature, that competitive nature. So at right back, we've got it currently with three internationals. At left back, we should have it. That's why Bernabei came in, to challenge Taylor for the jersey. You look at the centre halves, there's five centre halves vying for two jerseys. And up top, you've got Kyogo and Giacomakis. So I'm not convinced it's just the case, I'm not getting any minutes, so I'm going to throw the toys at the pram. If you're not getting enough minutes, you've just got to convince the manager you should be the first pick. And then if you get a sniff of it, like you did last season with the injury, you come in and you prove your worth. In terms of your own observations and your analysis of Giacomakis, what will we be missing should he leave the club?
Yeah, I mean, he was a very well scouted player in my view, because he fitted the way that Celtic play under Postecoglou very well. We've got used to, had got used to pre-Postecoglou strikers who were quite all-rounders in terms of being, all-round forward. So Edouard was as comfortable coming deep and linking play, drifting in from the left as he was being in the box. Lee Griffiths liked to wander around a lot as well, picking up the ball wide and so forth, taking shots from distance. Dembele was a bit more of a traditional centre forward, but again, he would get involved outside the box, winning headers and again linking play up. What we've found under Postecoglou is that the strikers have a much reduced involvement in the game. If you just look at raw data on number of touches, right? And we really want those players to be in the box, finishing off low firm crosses into the box or cutbacks, and I'm not really concerned about getting them involved in any of the stuff outside the box. And as you rightly said about Giakoumakis, he's not the most technical player from a first touch, from a, does he see the obvious pass? Does he execute it well? Not great, really. But he's got a good physical presence about him. He can fight for the ball. He presses well, which is another component that's necessary to play under Ange. And we've seen with his finishing, that sort of one-touch finishing run that he went on last season, where every goal just required a single touch to finish. That's exactly the type of striker you need, playing the type of football that Celtic play. So in my view, he was very well scouted, and he's a great fit for the system. And actually, his data, especially at Scottish League level, where the quality of the opponent is almost more important than the individual, and because of the strength of the system under Ange, it means that individuals' data can almost be, I won't say raised up, but can almost be consistent because of the consistent way that Celtic play. So I don't mean it's as simple as you could literally put anyone in and you'd get the same result. It's not as straightforward as that. I just mean that, the power of the system is greater than the individual players and their attributes. And if you've got players that are a good match, like Giakoumakis, and and he's attuned to the way that Celtic play, you'll probably get good results, and Celtic have. So I think it would be a big loss. He's clearly highly effective at the Scottish domestic level, and that's sort of that's priority number one. We have to win in Scotland. In Europe, he did get a goal in the Champions League, but he's probably not as effective as, for example, Kyogo. That's where the technical gulf comes into play, and that's why Kyogo's first choice. Just that extra amount of technical ability, the extra bit of speed over a very short distance in the box, that kind of thing. So I think it'd be a real blow to lose him. I don't think we'll sell him until we have got a replacement. To Brian's point, I believe we were looking for another striker. Whether we end up with 3, I don't know, because as you say, we've got 5 wingers. 2 of them are very good as centre forwards. Maeda and Abada are both excellent as strikers. So possibly we'll end the window with the 2. Although coming back to the targets, or the alleged targets, is that I think they're actually quite different in profile. So Cho, to me, would be someone who comes in and would expect to get a lot of significant minutes as a starter. Whereas, I'll take a deep breath here, Szymon Wlodarczyk looks like more of a kind of Lil Abada, bring him in, talented young player, bed him in over a period type of signing. So quite different potential. I might be wrong, but that's just the way I would see it. I think they're actually quite different in profile in that regard. But yeah, no, Giakoumakis has done very well. Clearly, Kyogo's on a good run, has been all season. Touch wood, he's avoided injury, so Giakoumakis still gets at least 30 minutes a game. And a feature of playing for Celtic is that if you're a substitute and you're coming on in the 60th minute of an SPFL game, you will on average get more opportunities than the starters do per minute. That's the nature of how Celtic dominate these games.
Is that because we've broken them down by that stage, Alan? Do you think we've broken the opposition down last half hour? Yep.
The 5 sub rule is is a game changer for Celtic in terms of their ability to dominate the other teams in the league. It gives Celtic a huge advantage in terms of the quality. They can effectively change the whole front five, and freshen it up. And a team like Kilmarnock might have done well to hold out for 50 minutes, but then another 40 minutes with fresh players is too much. So players like Giakoumakis can still rack up great numbers and get lots of opportunities and lots of chances, like he did on against Kilmarnock and like Forest did, for example. Even though they're coming off the bench, so it's still a good role, if you like. What his personal circumstances, though, as you said, he's a human being. He's 28. His next move, as they say, is going to be probably his biggest one. And like you say, he's probably not one of the big earners, and so he's got to think about himself, of course, as we all do.
Yeah, for sure. That is interesting. Makes perfect sense. And I do want to talk about Kilmarnock because obviously it's Kilmarnock again. I'm going to bring in a few of these comments, guys. And whilst I do that, get your thinking hats on, because I want to talk about the comment that was made around Derek McInnes, not the one about bigots doing star jumps outside his office, but the fact that the current side is the best he's faced. And bearing in mind, Derek McInnes was up against the Invincible side under Brendan Rodgers. I want you to have a wee think about the Invincibles against the current side and let me know your thoughts once I've run through a few of these comments. Connor Rowan, I'll be amazed if we end up signing Cho now. We had our transfers done early under Ange up until now, and we all know, well, here we go. I've seen a lot of this on social media, Brian. What do you make of that? Because I'm not buying that a change of chairmanship has affected the recruitment policy. What's your thoughts?
This stuff kills me a little bit. If I'm honest, it's all conspiracies. I think it's really hyperbolic, and I think that Peter Law coming back as non-exec chairman is not influencing Cho's decision to come to Celtic or not. I mean, he's not interfering with transfers. We've already signed 3 players.
Yeah.
I think we only need to relax with this stuff. He's a chairman, and that's it. If I've said before, if it goes further down the line and it turns out he has been interfering, I'm pretty sure Ange will tell him or tell us. I don't think he's a man to be told, I'll tell you who you're buying, I'll tell you who you're playing. I don't think Michael Nicholson, the CEO, is going to be told, you keep quiet, sit in the corner, I'm Peter Law. I don't think his son's going to be happy as head of recruitment if his dad comes in and starts telling him his work.
Exactly.
So I get if he's a bit, you say Peter Law, people lose their mind. We need to calm down a bit and just be realistic, in my opinion. I think I've been accused, not very politely in the past, I've been a Law sympathiser, and I don't really know what that means, if I'm honest. I just think, I think his record was very good from a business point of view, less so in terms of his interference, but he's a different role now. And I think he's always been about the club. He's been about the club since Ange came in anyway. So if he's going to interfere, it would have been done by now.
Yeah, and actually on that point, Alan, if he is interfering in transfers, then he interfered pretty well with the previous 3 that we got over the line. You can't just say, he's to blame for the Cho transfer breaking down, because we've already got 3 players in the door. And Johnson has hit the ground running. Look forward to seeing Kobayashi and Iwata. So it's not something I'm buying at this moment in time. As Brian says, if something comes out later on, fair enough, hands up. But I can see the logic, but I don't agree with it with regards to Peter Lawwell being the reason behind the Cho deal. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I will maintain an ongoing healthy scepticism. Let's put it that way, right? So there's no evidence that Peter Lawwell is interfering with transfers at this point in time. So, this Cho one in particular is just a really difficult transfer because of the fact that the contact was made before the World Cup. The World Cup then raised the player's profile, and obviously the club and his agent are looking to maximise what that means for them, and that's what's made it complicated. It's just, however, it does speak volumes for the scepticism of the Celtic support in general that these questions even get asked. As I say, for my part, I'll be keeping a keen eye on how things develop. I think there are a few things for me that are concerning still about how Celtic are operating. It does seem like Ange's role is far too broad, and that he needs help. We need strong heads of department in various areas and allow him to focus purely on the first team. and the football side of it. Ange's close friend and agent Frank Trimboli seems to have an awful lot of influence over both incomings and outgoings, and that, to me, he might be doing a good job, and we might have made good decisions, but that doesn't. To me, that's no better than the situation we were in, where allegedly Lowell had his preferred coterie of agents that he would go to. We need to have a spectrum of people, a wide range of contacts. Not be reliant. I'm concerned that if Ange does, if and when Ange does walk out the door, we're kind of floundering around and having to go back to ground zero, if you like. And then on top of that, you add in the sort of the Peter Lowell factor, which is that whatever his role and whatever the more ceremonial and strategic and hands-off the chairman role should be, it's not in Peter's nature to not meddle. And at what point does that start to become an issue, if indeed it does happen? So these are all the things in my mind that I'm kind of sceptical about or slightly worried about, that I'll be keeping an eye on, basically.
Got to say, Alan, I do agree with you on one thing. It's interesting. Paul mentioned the Invincibles team. Because if you look at what happened when Brendan Rodgers left, and that whole, everyone left, sports science guys, everyone left, and it really killed us, I think. I'm always harping on about it. We need continuity so that if or when Ange goes, we continue the same way. We recruit a coach to match our style and not the other way about. Because otherwise, that's why the academy's been set back so many years. That's why transfers sometimes don't work. And that's where I think maybe we don't progress to the level in Europe we should either. So I agree with that fact that that's a real concern. I just hope that, because there'd be some sort of director of football role in place by the time I'm supposed to continue that work. But yeah, that's a big unknown, isn't it? And I agree with that. I think that is a concern.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll keep an eye on it. We'll keep a keen eye. We discuss everything on a Celtic State of Mind. John Cunningham probably can't strike a deal with the striker. Probably died due to image rights, but not 100% committed. We move on. Sad to see GG go, not given proper chance. Could have been better to start him this season. It's one of my frustrations, I guess, that if Giakoumakis does go, and I said this yesterday, I would love to have seen him, as the main striker. What damage could he have done as the main striker over a prolonged period of time? I've not really seen that with Giakoumakis due to injury and the form of Kyogo as well. Jason Lee, I'm done with Cho. Time to move on. Kind of feeling that way myself, and I'm sure there'll be big updates coming in. But I asked you guys to have a wee think about the Invincible side versus the current side, due to the comments made by Derek McInnes, whose team we'll be facing tomorrow, and it'll lead us nicely onto the Kilmarnock game and have a wee preview of that. And I'll start with yourself, Brian. I mean, one of the greatest times as a Celtic fan in my Celtic supporting life, indeed, was that Invincible season. The beginning of the quadruple treble. Still incredible to think that we won 4 trebles on the bounce. But a very special side. What did you make of the comments? Do you agree with them? What would happen if there was a head-to-head?
So I've got something I want to talk about regarding Derek McInnes and some of the comments he makes, but we'll get to that maybe later when we preview the game. In terms of that, I think certainly the best football I remember seeing as a Celtic fan, possibly ever. Maybe since Tommy Burns' team, really. And while Rodgers was incredibly successful in his Invincibles team, sometimes the football wasn't fantastic. So I think if you look at it comparatively, it would be harder to play against Ange's team if you're in opposition. So I do sort of understand why he would think that. In terms of how they match up, I mean, I'll rely on Al Stats Bomb stuff for this, but I feel like
hospital pass.
Yeah, hospital pass. Well done. I think that Ange's aggression and style of play and approaching was lacking. I feel like if we were to score first against Rodgers' side, I think we'd beat them. However, I think Rodgers' team could beat the press fairly well. And they do control. So it's really, really hard. I'm going to say Ange, but with the caveat that it could go either way. But so I'm not sitting on the fence and being that guy, I'll say Ange's team. And I think it's just because of the aggression and pace and that sort of seeing things through to the end, of like goals and stuff.
Yeah, and Ange's team to win 4-3 then. Alan, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think so. Rodgers' team was more about control, so controlling the football and really you defended by keeping the ball. And I think overall his team would give up less chances and would prioritise, as I say, possession, even if it was sometimes safe possession, over trying to break down the opposition. Whereas what I love about Postecoglou's style is I think he's got the perfect, especially in Scotland. Certainly in Scotland, I think he's almost mastered the art of, a balance between controlling the game, keeping the football, having high possession, playing a lot of passes, but also being very aggressive with those passes and trying to break teams down, committing players forward, more so than under Rodgers for sure. So I would say Postecoglou's team would probably have a better record overall domestically. I think we're deadly effective, and I think this 5 sub rule, which is not something Rodgers had the advantage of, changes the dynamic significantly. We can really steamroller teams at high pace for 90 minutes because of that, and I think that you can't underestimate what a difference that makes. I think in Europe it's a bit more difficult to say. Under that invincible season was when we shipped 7 goals to Barcelona away, and we lost at home to Borussia Mönchengladbach, the game which effectively ended Kolo Touré's career. And but then we had 2 creditable draws with Manchester City home and away. This time we've performed creditably, but not that those defensive weaknesses were badly exposed. Our defensive system was badly exposed in Europe. So I would say kind of 50-50 maybe on that one at best. Maybe Rodgers' team had the slight edge, actually, to be fair to them, given the Man City results, just because of that extra bit of control that they exerted. The last thing I'll say about Rodgers' team and that invincible season is that we massively over-scored versus our expected goals. I think if you look across the whole season, Celtic had something like 114 XG, and we actually scored 150 goals. And if I remember the stat correctly, we scored something like 16 or 18 goals from outside the box.
Yeah.
It was just, I don't know if you remember that season, I think Armstrong scored something like 15, 16 goals, and the next season he scored 1, because he thought that if he kept shooting from outside the box that they would all go in, because they had done on that invincible season. So there was a little bit of that. There was a little bit of, it's good fortune. If you're taking a shot from distance, you've really only got a 2-3% chance of it going in. And if you're massively exceeding that, there's a little bit of luck involved in that, in all that, really, over a period, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know if that answers fully the question, but they were the things that I thought about anyway.
Yeah, interesting thing about Rodgers, though, I would say that I don't know if I would say he has this overrange, but one of the things that I always was impressed by Rodgers was he was constantly communicating with the players, especially if we conceded. You could see, I remember particularly when the 3-2 game at Ibrox, I think it was, when we went to 10 men, and that was a real tactical masterclass. And Ange doesn't seem to do that as much. I don't know if that's because the system's a system and he's coached it and that's how it works. And he can make decisions maybe more subtly, but that's probably a distinction between the two in terms of what he's done on the touchline.
But to Brian, to be fair, I believe a lot of the time that was Chris Davis. Chris Davis was the one who would be looking and suggesting little tweaks much of the time. And I think you raise a good point. I mean, it'd be great if Ange felt he had somebody of Chris Davis's talent to support him. I think that'd be a really useful thing. I don't know to what extent the current backroom team do or don't do that, to be fair. So I might be being unfair there, but certainly Davis.
Why Gavin Strachan's the real brains behind Celtic? Al, is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I'm negotiating at the moment to buy his second-hand laptop off him.
I more or less, when I think about it, I know it's kind of fantasy land stuff, but I do think about the head-to-heads. So I think, Jota against Tierney, for example, or Maeda against Lustig. Up top, it would be Dembele versus Carter Vickers. That's the kind of thing I think about when I think about two teams coming together. But yeah, it was an interesting comment made by the manager of our opposition tomorrow. Obviously, it's going to be a 5:30 kickoff. We'll be covering the game as always. Kaiser comes in. There's a lot of window left to sign a striker. I would prefer we sign 2 if Giakoumakis is definitely off. Yeah, I think that would... it would definitely cover us. And from Ange's perspective, he said that there would be a couple of deals. We've already got 3. We're going for our 4th. Can we bring in 5? let's see. I'm sure there'll be lots of developments in the next couple of weeks. Magnet67. Afternoon, Acsom team. To be honest, I tend to blank out all the transfer speculation these days because it is just that. I trust Ange to do what is best for the team and the squad. There's going to be so much happening behind the scenes that we'll never know about, but it is something that takes up a lot of the discussion throughout January. But this leads us on to tomorrow's game then, Brian. Kilmarnock, they were stubborn. They did exactly what we thought they would do. Took us a wee while to make the breakthrough, and I thought the second half was far more enjoyable as a Celtic fan, certainly to watch. We got that goal at a really vital time, I felt, the opening goal. And we showed that on another day. It could have been a far more convincing victory, but we came away with the 3 points, and it was convincing enough. Andrew's spoken about the fact that all these other factors come into play. One of the ones he mentioned is it's a cup game. He says, that's a dynamic. That's an element to this that makes it different from last week. Of course, it's also a different venue. Talk me through your thoughts tomorrow in terms of how we line up and how you see the game going.
I would imagine the game will go pretty similar. I think McInnes is, relatively speaking, a decent manager for Scottish teams. I think they're a fairly good job at Aberdeen. I think they'll be hard to break down again. But I think our approach will be what our approach always is, right? We'll keep going. And as Al says, the subs rule always plays in our favour. We look at the quality in our squad. So I suspect we'll keep doing what we're doing and we'll go for it. What will be interesting, and I don't know if he's fit to play, if Kyle Lafferty plays, what factor that will be. And it boils my blood a bit. I saw some headline in a mainstream media outlet that said that, Lafferty was chomping at the bit to play against Celtic. And you think, given what he's suspended for, I wonder why. And I wonder if that's the tone-deaf headlines we should be comfortable with. That stuff kills me all the time. It always winds me up. And I was actually really disappointed when McInnes was talking about how he felt really sorry for him being suspended and stuff, because I think he's a cleverer guy than that. And I think that was really stupid. And I think if that had been a different slur he'd thrown about, there'd be no sympathy for him, which is a bigger story. But I had to get it off my chest because it was annoying me. But in terms of the game tomorrow, I don't see Ange making too many changes. Maybe the wingers might switch around a bit again. Tends to like to do that. I'd imagine Kyogo starts given the Yakimakis situation. Mm-hmm. What I'd be really interested in is if Kobayashi or Iwata come into the team. Now, I don't think they will. But there's always that chance. I'd be excited to see it, especially Iwata. I hope I'm saying that right. But especially Iwata. I wonder if he would consider moving McGregor further forward. It'd be Hatate, McGregor, Iwata. Is a midfield three what that looks like? I don't know. But you may find changes like that. I think that'd be exciting. But in terms of approach, it'd be what Celtic do, what Ange does, and I think we'll win.
It's an interesting one, Brian, because if you're going to throw someone in for their debut at Ibrox right back, then you're brave enough and you rate the player enough to put them in if necessary. Alan, what do you make? Obviously, going into the Kilmarnock game at the weekend there, O'Reilly dropped out for Moy, and Bernabe comes in at left back. Do you see many changes with the lineup? How do you see the game going?
No, I mean, I try to be a very observant Ange watcher if I can. He doesn't play mind games. He doesn't tinker with lineups. He doesn't try to be a clever bugger as far as throwing surprises in the lineup. So I hear what Brian's saying. I would probably look to the Morton game from maybe a couple of people coming in that maybe haven't featured much or making their debuts possibly. He's not a clever bugger in that regard, as I say. Postecoglou, he'll pick what he thinks is the strongest team, and I don't think there'll be any surprises in it. So the game, I mean, how different will the game be? Well, there's a limit to how different it can be given the personnel that Kilmarnock do or don't have, right? I mean, we saw that. I don't know if they had many players out injured. I mean, Polworth's probably their best passer of the ball. He played. They gave a debut to Lad Vassell up front, who was kind of a big physical striker. I imagine he'll start again. He was okay, but I mean, he wasn't going to run away from anybody, and he didn't look to be. I looked at his profile actually because I'd never heard of him, and I wanted to see if he was related to Darius Vassell, which apparently he is in a distant way. And this guy's had 22 clubs. It's incredible. He's only 29. But anyway, I digress. So, long story short, I don't think Kilmarnock have got the personnel to play much differently to how they played. And you know, Derek McInnes, every time he plays Celtic, goes man-to-man in midfield, and every time he looks disappointed when it doesn't work. And if he's no learned by now, he's not going to learn and change his approach on Saturday. So I think it'll be very different. I think we, as a Celtic sport, have to be very patient because But having said that, there's things that Celtic can certainly do better than what we did in the league game. I think we had a terribly unbalanced attack on Saturday. Everything came down the left-hand side. The first half was basically Starfelt to Bernabei to Tate to Bernabei to Starfelt, and that just went on and on and on. And Alistair Johnston was reduced to playing left wing to try and get the ball. Jota, who normally is a ball-hungry winger, was kind of stood out, give me the ball type of thing. We need to address that. That was so unbalanced. It was unbelievable. And also, it adds a bit of risk because, if you've got Bernabei and Hatate in the same team, whilst that gives you, and Bernabei's pass to Maeda for the opening goal was a thing of wonder, and Hatate generally, I thought, took up some excellent positions. I thought his movement to find pockets of space was wonderful. But what both Bernabei and Hatate do is they turn over the ball more than anyone else in the squad. Mm-hmm. And when you have them together on the same side of the pitch, the risk of a turnover and a counter against a team like Kilmarnock is probably pretty low, to be honest. But against a European level team, that would be a massive risk in my book. So just a couple of things to think about. I hope we balance the attack a bit more. I hope we try and go down the right side because Johnson looks like he's got a terrific engine. He takes up brilliant positions when he inverts and comes in field. Obviously, we want to get Jota on the game. He is all things considered Celtic's most effective all-round attacking player in terms of creating things, and that would be what I'd be looking for really. But I don't think it'll be very different. I think it'll be a tough attritional game. But I think again, you're looking from 55 sort of minutes out for the subs to come on and start to really kind of open things up as happened on Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're going to be covering it here. Tune in from 5 o'clock and we'll be going live before, during and after the game, obviously at halftime and full time as well. A couple of more comments coming in. John Cunningham, would there be a top 11 between the two teams? Listen, that's a podcast in itself. Gordon over Hart, Tierney over Taylor. That's a discussion for another day, I think. But good shout, good shout. Fitzy, Sinclair would take Jura's soul. That would be a nice battle for sure. Strangelove the Doctor. Brendan's team without the ball not so good. Andy's team would create panic every time they went forward. Close game, but a draw. Probably about a 4-each draw. And Red Scotland comes in. Countless times Brennan made a non-substitutional tactical change from the touchline, and a Celtic goal often followed. That doesn't happen now. So yeah, I'm sure it would be an interesting thing. The old fantasy Celtic football there. A couple of players I want to talk about. First of all, Stephen Welsh. Now, I know that, Alan, you and I have discussed Stephen Welsh a fair bit over the years, and it looks as though the time has finally come that he's going to leave the club. There is chat, Anthony Johnson actually picked up on it the other day there. There is chat that there has been interest over the last two windows. Celtic are now prepared to allow him to go. I had said previously, we've got Jens and we've got Welsh, both not really playing, and maybe loan Welsh out to the end of the season, then make a decision which one of the two do you keep. Where are you with Welsh at the moment, Alan? Is it time for him to go on a permanent deal?
Yeah, I think he's the area that he developed the most as a player was really his passing out from the back, which was really, really strong and got stronger, and that's fair play to him. Defensively, he's very similar to Starfelt, probably not as front foot and aggressive as Starfelt, but he has the same kind of weaknesses, I suppose, in terms of aerially he's quite weak. Again, my understanding is that it's one of these situations where I think the manager likes him. I think he thinks there's a player there, but is it all happening fast enough for the player himself? Or does Welsh feel that he actually wants to be a first-team regular somewhere, and therefore it's time to move on? That may well be the case. So, we can see, as you said, that Carter Vickers and Starfelt are the first choice. We've just brought in a left-sided centre-back. Jens is still in the squad as well. I think it's just one of these cases where Welsh doesn't see his pathway into being a first-team starter, and it's time to move on in that regard. I mean, I'm always a bit sad when a young Scottish player leaves, because I always would love, ideally, to see the team be represented by local lads, etc. But putting sentimentality to one side, it may be in Welsh's interest, 23 years old, that his first-team football lies elsewhere. There was rumour of interest from Toulouse in the summer. Now, Toulouse are a really smart club. And that would be, I would love him to go to Toulouse, because I think that he would be well treated. They would have thought about how they were going to use him. They would have done their homework on him, and I think it would have been a good fit for him. So I hope he gets something like that if he does leave. Yeah,
it seems, Brian, that he is keen to play his football abroad. Some other Scottish talents have done that and done very, very well. Aaron Hickey's come back, obviously, to British football with Brentford. And I think back to the Jack Hendry transfer, a guy who couldn't buy a game for Celtic when he left. And I know that there was the loan deal that didn't go too well over in Australia due to injury, but then he goes to Belgium and he finds himself, gets back into the Scotland team, becomes a big player, a very valuable player. Can you see Welsh going out there and really making a name for himself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you and I both called out Welsh as being a bit underrated at times. I think he's one of those guys, it's almost James Forrest syndrome. I think he gets a wee bit of a hard time, or maybe sort of overlooked because he comes from the youth squad. But I think, you look at, he get thrown in next to Shane Duffy in one of our most horrible seasons for a long time. He had the mentality to try and take it, to try and improve, to keep trying, to keep doing things, to keep trying to press for the back. And I think when you look at Ange coming in, and the pressure he was under, the pressure the team was under, and I don't think he's ever really let us down under Ange. I agree with Al as well. I think I said it before about Starfelt. It's one of the things that, while I like Starfelt, does concern me is he does get caught under bigger strikers quite a lot with the ball, and he's in a bit of a tizzy at times, because he is quite an aggressive guy. And I think Welsh probably has the same weakness. So having two of them in the squad probably wasn't ideal, because it's a partnership. It never really worked. So I can understand why he's going, but a wee bit disappointed. I thought maybe, he maybe had a bit of a future, but I think if he goes abroad, I think everyone will be happy to see him do well, and I think he'll thrive. I think he seems to have the mentality of, I'm going to get better. I think he's a good ball player, actually. I think he brings the ball out really well for the back, and I think that'll benefit teams that like to sign him. So fair play to him. I've got a question for Al, if that's all right. You as well, Paul, but just I know I'll love you. How important do you think it is? Because I think it's very important, right? But see if you look at the balance for your two centre-backs, Carter Vickers, who's always going to start, do you think a left-footed centre-back or a left-sided centre-back is essential for us? Because I still think Starfelt's better than the right. I think it can be a wee bit cumbersome on the left. Do you think Kobayashi's coming in to replace him? And if not, is Jens, he looked to be the answer for me because he looked very balanced on the left-hand side. Am I just making too much of that, or do you think it's really important to get a strong left-sided and you've got two right-sided, two left-sided, and then one to cover?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So I think in an ideal world, you'd want to have a left-footed player playing on the left side. It just opens up the play in that regard. That's ideally, right? But left-sided centre-backs who are also really good at football, as opposed to just being left-footed, are incredibly rare, right? So it's very difficult. So you end up, most teams, in fact, end up making compromises in that regard. The second point I'd make is that, Carter Vickers is a bit of a curse because he's such a high benchmark for other centre-halves coming to Celtic now. If we could get two centre-backs of the same quality as him and one other of a similar quality, I think that would be the ideal. But as I say, that is such a high benchmark that I think everyone else almost suffers in comparison a little bit. So we tend to be a little bit hard on people. I mean, I think I wrote Starfelt off actually within 6 months because I just saw things in his play, given his age profile, that were never going to change. Now, what I think happened is that he became settled into the system, and the system is so strong. The understanding between the players is so strong. Everyone knows what they're doing, and that can compensate for a lot of individual weaknesses because of that systemic strength within the lineup was one thing. And to be fair to him, he did cut out a lot of individual errors, but was still prone in terms of, as you say, he's overly. I keep saying I like my strikers to be optimistic and my defenders to be pessimistic. And Starfelt is an optimistic defender. He always thinks he can win the ball, and I don't like that. I want my defenders to always think that the worst is going to happen and position themselves accordingly. And he overreaches in terms of what he can and can't do. I still think we need to improve that position. You mentioned his awkwardness. I mean, again, that probably triggers my confirmation bias a little bit, because he just physically looks awkward when he's trying to control and manipulate the ball and to move it on. Yeah. I think it's a tough one. My wish is to use Carter Vickers as a template and say, right, give me another player like that and play the two together. And I don't think we're there yet. But I've got no idea what Kobayashi is like. If he's good and he's left-footed, brilliant. But I don't think it's. I think many clubs in the world mitigate around not having a good left-sided centre back.
What was your take on Jens just before sorry to hijack you?
I did like him. I did think, but he's disappeared from the face of the earth by the looks of it. I thought that he did look more comfortable as a natural left-sided defender. But then my take on that was that we keep him and Welsh and we work with that. Then Kobayashi comes into the equation. And then the whole dynamic of that changes, because then you start thinking, well, he's a player that obviously Ange knows pretty well from his time in Japan. I think he's going to be favoured over Jens. He's certainly been on the bench last couple of weeks. And I think Jens has maybe been unlucky, but we're not seeing it every day in, day out. Based on appearances, and this is just to my own observer's eye rather than data, I did like him. One thing I was going to ask Alan is, we used to have chats around Ajer and where Ajer sat in the data going back to when you started collating it for Celtic, and some of his figures, some of the data was right up there with the best of them. And you were talking, about players like Boyata and Van Dijk, Ajer, all in the same breath, because you were able to compare the data, Alan. Where does Carter Vickers, where's he placed in the great scheme of things?
Yeah. So, Ajer unfortunately had his last season wasn't good. It wasn't good for anybody, and so his numbers kind of fell back a little bit towards the pack. So, but if you think of Van Dijk as being sort of like the gold standard, and actually, if you remember Filip Benkovic, he didn't play many games, but he was incredibly impressive in the games that he did play. Chris Jullien at his best in that sort of 1920 season. Was also, up there as well. Carter Vickers would be right up at the top of centre halves that Celtic have had since I started collecting data, so going back nearly 10 years now. He would absolutely be right up there. I think the thing with Jens is one. I think it's one of these situations where he's actually no better than what we've got. So for me, if I had Stephen Welsh and I had Jens, I would not be paying money for Jens. I would be keeping Stephen Welsh. That would be my. If I had to choose, I would keep Welsh, because I don't think there's really not that much between them. But if Welsh leaves, then I think you've got a decision to make. That becomes a more interesting dynamic. But none of those players, Jens, Welsh, Starfelt, they're at best the sort of middle to bottom of the centre halves we've had in the last 10 years, and there's a big gulf in performance versus Carter Vickers. And that to me, that remains one of our weaknesses that we need to resolve overall.
I found it interesting that the transfer fee that was being discussed when they were looking back at Welsh's approaches over the last couple of transfer windows was £3.5 million, Brian. And it would be interesting to see if indeed he goes, how much we bring in for him. Another couple of things before we wrap up. We've only got about 5 or 6 minutes. Thanks everybody for getting involved, by the way. We're about 750 strong watching live. If you haven't done so already, give us a thumbs up on the video on YouTube, give us a big like and subscribe to the channel. We've got loads of gifts and prizes that we're going to be giving away. The announcement for the latest prize, which is a concept Adidas retro jersey, That will be announced today, and we have tickets and various other bits and bobs that will be given out, and we'll announce them as we go along. So do subscribe to the channel. We're growing that channel as much as possible. I want to talk about Tomoki Iwata, because you've mentioned him a couple of times, Brian, and in respect of what does that mean for other players at the club. So we've kind of spoken about that with Welsh and the fact that we now have Kobayashi, and he might now be surplus to requirements. Iwata comes in, and I'm looking at Abildgaard, Ideguchi and McCarthy. So what do we do with these three players who currently are not contributing to the first team?
Well, they've got to go, don't they? I mean, I think it seems harsh, but I said for a while I didn't think Gucci was going to have a future. I think Abildgaard hasn't been. I think he's good. I think individually they're all good players, right? So I'm not saying they're bad players, but I just think for the way Ange operates, I don't think any of the three of them. Like McCarthy's very good at breaking up attacks. He is a good defensive mid, but he's not a good defensive mid in Ange's team. Same with Abildgaard, he's a really good player, but not in Ange's team. I think he signed Iwata because we signed him twice. He signed him for when he was at Marinos and then from Marinos. So clearly he's a player he likes, and if he's a player he likes, he's a good player, right? And you've got to know the system inside out. For the sort of YouTube research, the amateur research we can do here, he looks very, very good at winning the ball back. He's very aggressive, very strong, and he's I think he's the tallest guy, but he's very robust. And I think you give that aggression for deep. The question will be, is he a long-term replacement for McGregor, or is he there to play alongside McGregor? And that's what I'm curious to see. And I think if he starts to appear, we start to see whereabouts he fits into that team the best and where he thinks McGregor is. I don't know what the answer to that will be. I really like McGregor in that role. But it's interesting to see, and I think why I'm so excited about him is A, that's a position I've been concerned about for a while, and B, and just signed him twice. He's a player, you know.
Oh, for sure. What about yourself then, Alan? Because it does seem like a bold move, but these three guys are just not contributing at the moment. Abildgaard's been really disappointing. I think you've mentioned previously that he does a defensive bit well, but transitioning that to attacks, not a strong point in his game. McCarthy, listen, I'd have loved it to work out, but I don't think we should be keeping guys in a squad because they're good in the dressing room or on a training pitch. And Ideguchi, it just hasn't worked out. And that's not been a case with many of Ange's signings. Do we keep any of them, do you think, Alan? Is it bold or too bold to move all three on?
No, I think we need to move them all on. I don't think they're going to contribute. I think you summarised it absolutely perfectly, really. McCarthy was somebody I think was brought in to help Ange because we simply did, the squad had been decimated and he was available on a free and he's an experienced individual. But in terms of stylistic fit to the way that Celtic play, it's very poor. Abildgaard is incredibly strong breaking up play, but he doesn't progress the ball well. And that's just not a non-starter for the way that the team plays, and Gucci just isn't of the standard that Celtic need, unfortunately. So there's no utility in keeping any of them around, in my view. Iwata's a fascinating signing. I think he has two major aspects that are classic Ange, really. One is just his attitude and his willingness to learn. He's a player who has played in and is will willingly adapt to different positions, whether it's right back, centre back, and centre midfield, and he throws himself into it 100% and gives everything, and seems to be a quick learner. So an intelligent player, really, with a great attitude, and that's always a massive factor when Ange signs anybody. And I think just that adaptability. I think Ange has said that he's looking for players that can play perhaps 2 or 3 positions, with the 5 sub rule that I keep coming back to, 16 players are going to get significant minutes every week. So you need a reasonable sized squad, and you need people that can come on and do slightly different roles if they have to. So will he replace McGregor? I think that's a big topic. It doesn't look like he's that type of player. He's more of a ball winner. I think he is. He's a good passer, but he's not a player like McGregor who really McGregor sort of drags the team forward and gives the team momentum and getting forward. So I don't think he's that exact type of player. But whether it means we play a double pivot in some games, possibly, I don't know. But certainly it would suggest to me that we bring him in, and I think the 3 players that you mentioned probably get moved on if that is possible. I mean, Abelgaard's, I think, it's a bit of a funny one. It was never really publicised or made clear what his situation was. He's registered to a Russian club. Essentially, he doesn't have the right to work. He's embargoed essentially. So I think FIFA gave dispensation for players like him in his situation to move to other clubs for a year, essentially, and effectively be dual registered because of that, the war situation. Whether we just say it's not worked out, back you go. I suspect that's what will happen.
Yeah, for sure. And his agent's obviously been making moves and speaking to the press, etc. One thing I would point out as well with regards to that tagline is Cho. One thing I liked about him was, going back to your point, Alan, he did play, left, right and centre, whereas our other alleged target is simply a central striker. So I found that pretty interesting as well. But it's been absolutely intriguing. It's always a pleasure to hear from Brian and Alan. Always a pleasure. If you want to come and see the whites of our eyes and see us in action live, then Danny McGrain is coming to join a Celtic State of Mind at Gracie's in Glasgow in March. Ticket link is underneath the video. Thanks everybody for supporting what we do. As I say, 750 on a Friday afternoon is phenomenal. Hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we'll be back for the game tomorrow. All that's left for me to say is Brian Degnan and Alan Morrison, thank you for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.